Hey, everybody, you're listening to and potentially watching the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
And we are your hairy, heavy homos that talk about comic books, but you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen in or possibly stream in. We apologize. We've been gone for 3 weeks, and nothing has happened in the United States in those 3 weeks.
It's been so quiet, like nothing has gone on. So boring.
Yeah. So, yes, this is our first episode post-election. I'm in a blue state. I fear in certain capacities for the other two gentlemen. More fearful about Ukraine and Gaza, naturally. But, yeah. How you guys holding up? I am oddly calm about this.
Not so much. I don't know what I'd call calm. I'm unsurprised. I'm not lighting my hair on fire. There's a lot of people who have just sunken into deep despair and everything's wrong. I'm not there, but I am very much. I mean, you guys know me. So when push comes to shove, I'm a manic person. So like, I'm looking around. I'm like, okay, who's doing work? Who's doing work I can support? Who's doing work I can help? Where can I pitch in? What can I do? You know, I'm relooking at the things that I do and saying, okay, not doing enough. Let me take an active step and push further and see how I can help more and make the world a better place. Because I think we need that now. I think we need to be looking for helpers, and we need to be looking for opportunities to help. So that's where I've been. You know, I've been helping people, again, not reinventing the wheel, looking for people who are already functioning, who are already up and moving, who have already collectivized to some degree, and seeing how I can help there. And then I'm taking the nonprofits that I work with and I help and saying, okay, we've got to broaden this. We've got to push this. We've got to do more for more people, because it's going to be, look, the end result is the end result, right? There's nothing we can do about it, but we know how bad it was last time. And I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, it wasn't that bad. And it was terrible. And we know how bad it's likely to get this time. It's going to be what it's going to be. So now it's time to put your boots on and get to fucking work. So that's where I'm at with it. I'm cussing a lot. It took everything I had not to take a lighter and set my JD on fire today when they announced who was going to be the nominee for AG, because the law doesn't matter. I'm glad I went through that hell when we decided not to do fucking law anymore. Just burn it. It doesn't matter. But, the
law still exists. It's just inconsequential.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean anything now.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a mixed bag, because we elected a Democratic governor, Josh Stein, who was our AG and who had done a great job for the past 4 years.
You rejected the black Nazi, but you voted for the white Nazi.
White Nazi. No, Josh Stein is great.
No, I'm talking. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know. It is funny. Like he won by a landslide, but then obviously people who voted for him also voted for Trump.
Yeah,
which is kind of like the AOC thing. She went on Blue Sky this past week and was like, "Look, I got reelected to my position by 67% of the electorate in my district, and yet." He also got 45%, which means that some of you also voted for him as well as me. So, why? What do we have in common? And the answers were confusing at best and just insulting at worst. But yeah, I mean, and we also and this might be unfortunate for the rest of the country, but we denied the woman who has been championing the book burnings and the banning of anything, any type of education in our state for the past couple of years. But now she's free to be available for the Department of Education or whatever will be left of it, But then also we do have Josh Jackson. Jackson, who has been entertaining us for a while with his TikTok and with his commentary in the state legislature, is now the new AG for North Carolina. And so we're very excited about that. But otherwise, the other good thing is we no longer the GOP no longer has a supermajority in North Carolina. So that one seat that flipped now has made it so that our governor actually has the ability to do anything now.
Yeah. I am really glad we've kind of gone past the blame game period, because I don't think there was any one reason why the outcome was the outcome. And I think when people step back, they will reappraise that this was a very unified Democratic it was a very united party through this. And that was the main thing to turn off politics. You know me, you guys know me, and it's always in the background, and it hasn't been, because that's the way it is for a little bit. But I look at the arcs of history, and in my life, which is the longest life of the three of us here, every second term of a Republican presidential term has been chaotic.
Yeah.
And at best. Yeah. So I don't think anything like this is, like you said, Caleb, this was not unexpected. The rate, the speed with which it was decided did surprise me a bit. And some of, and again, Steve, you hit it too with, there were some very positive outcomes. There's some very good people that got elected. Like I look at Ruben Gallego, and again, that's another similar situation where, the numbers don't align.
We have the first openly trans person in the House of Representatives now. Yeah. And that's incredible. That being said, and not to put ideas in anybody's head, but I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to pull some shenanigans and refuse to seat her. I've seen that posted in different, because I do what I do and I read the comment section because I just want to die early. And I've seen people say that. I've seen people talk about that. So who knows what will actually happen, but there is, we see a lot of the country that did put the right people in the right places at the state level. And to AOC's point, right, there's an interesting thing that happened to where everywhere that things like abortion were on the ballot, they got more than a majority, even in Florida where it didn't pass because they require 60-something%, because Florida is the state that's leading the charge on minority rule. It still got well over 50% and should have passed in any other state that has a dedication to democracy, and it would have, but everywhere else it passed. Everywhere where things like a larger minimum wage increase was on the ballot, stuff like that passed. So, and that's going to help out a lot of people, and it's going to do a lot of good. My fear and my concern at the federal level, and I'm going to put on my educated conspiratorialist hat on for a little bit, is that what we are seeing is a purposeful injection of willful ignorance into the federal government. They are placing people who are this is an anti-federalist machine, right? And they are placing anti-federalist or people who are vapidly incompetent in these places in the machine. So if they can place these broken cogs in the machine, then the machine will break down, and then they can point and say, hey, look, the machine doesn't work. Like give it, like scrap it, get rid of it because it doesn't work. That's been an autocratic playbook theme in every country where the autocrats have been taken power, because they know that a functioning unified government is not good for their point of view. And so that is my educated fear in what we're seeing now with the appointments of people who just are like to have sit here in this world and have been told that myself and everybody like me was nothing short of a DEI hire for the past 8 goddamn years. And that what we needed was a resurgence of meritocracy. And then this is what the fuck you give us? Are you goddamn kidding me? Like this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm oddly calm. I think for a variety of reasons, we all should prepare for a President Vance. Do it now.
Oh, yeah.
Do it now. Prepare for that in your head.
Yeah.
Which will be a different kind of evil. And I don't know, someone far smarter than myself said, we have to get on with it. And that's not positivity, that's necessity.
Yeah.
And
facts.
And I don't know. I just am calm about it. And, some of the scenarios playing in my head are not appealing, not appealing to a democracy, but I'm oddly calm about it. And, I think I've given that piece of shit one sleepless night over the last 2 weeks, and that's all I'm giving him.
Yeah.
That's all I'm giving him. And Caleb, you said it yourself. And this thing with some people like, oh, what can we do? Go to the people that are already in the trenches.
Yeah.
Go to the people that already do things. If it's if veterans' rights is not your thing, then possibly animal welfare is. That there are things that you can do to make a difference. There are situations like myself, I still maintain my law license.
Mm-hmm.
I could do something with that. I just think that we have to, clean up our own backyard in a sense. That's all we can do right now. But you do that and you see 40 million clean backyards, something's going to change. And there are things that I am heartened by, the immediate backlash to that fucking little piece of shit weasel, Nick Fuentes.
Yes.
That over the past 4 days, the most Googled term is, can I change my vote? So there are things that I'm encouraged by in a sense. Plus, the sharks are in the water, but when it's only sharks, they have to eat each other. And it's, fucking break out the popcorn for that. I mean, there's going to be some really interesting times ahead. Even something like John Thune, prevailing to become the Senate Majority Leader over Voldemort. Things like that. I honestly do think that there will be some sense still through all this. There's going to be a lot of fucking craziness and a lot of incompetency. Some of these really are it's idiocracy appointments. But we said this before we started, when Marco Rubio is the most impressive appointment. Where are we? And I really do think in my heart that a lot of people didn't know what they were getting into, because not everybody is a political machine. Not everybody is tuned in. And with the loss, you cannot fight patriarchy and you cannot fight apathy.
Yeah,
to the level that some people think you can.
I was going to say, I agree with you on that to a point, but you don't have to be super tuned in to know what this is. Like you don't have.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
I'm not. I've got family members that I dearly, dearly love that are very, very important in my life that walked up to me and told me that I like their apathy was more important to them than my safety in my marriage. Right. Yeah. And while I still love them,
I'm not doing with this, because I just told somebody who's been freaking out, just don't go to Thanksgiving. Just don't do it.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm being stirred. They're still my family. I still love them, but there. So to that degree, there's a difference between like and love, and you're allowed to be disappointed in people that you love, and I'm not going to hold that back. I'm not going to hide it. No, it is what it is. Do I love you? Yes.
So happy I don't have to contend with that.
Yeah.
My mother was a chapter president of the League of Women Voters. I don't think she would have made a turn. My dad was very much a Kennedy Democrat.
Yeah.
I don't think he would have made that turn. But then again, September 11th broke a lot of brains. So who knows?
That's true.
But it is something I don't have to contend with. And even on Rob's side, it's just not a factor. Yeah. I feel so greatly for people that do have to contend with that. And
I do think so I do think that there is a point to be made, though, in that at least the folks on my end of things weren't malicious about it, right? Like, so do I have people who absolutely, I mean, went to bat for him? Yeah, like they were, and I tried to explain tried to put it in words, tried to explain, hey, like this is what you're supporting, and they didn't understand it and they didn't see it. And I mean, but what they are worried about, I mean, legitimately it's not hyperbole, and it's not just the easy pickings. It's going to the grocery store, right? It is putting gas in the tank, and they do not understand why the prices are that way that they are. They do not understand why, when they look back and they see, that, hey, well, it seems like during that other guy's presidency that gas was $1.80 and that food was super cheap. Yeah, and about a 1.3
fucking pandemic and nobody
million people died, and we couldn't leave our houses. Right, and we were afraid to hug our grandmothers because they might be next. Yeah, that's the price you want to pay. Also, and the thing I keep telling people, and then we can move on and talk about happier things, is I remember what gas prices were on September 10th of 2001. And I remember what they went up to on September 12th of 2001. And I know that we were paying for the same price, the same gas. It was in the same tank and nothing changed. But these companies took advantage of a crisis to explode prices. And then they took advantage of that same crisis to evade price gouging prosecution, because they had said, hey, look, these are all the things that were happening, and so we had to do yada yada yada, and those prices never came back down, right? Profits skyrocketed, right? They were getting, like, the money was going everywhere. There was no supply and demand issue in reality, but they skyrocketed. And the same thing has happened, right? The same thing has happened at the grocery stores during the pandemic. Prices skyrocketed, and the private sector companies now know what the public will pay for those things that they have to have, like fuel and food, and they will never bring the prices back down again, right? They may lower them. They may lower them to a point, but they are never going to be what they were beforehand, because they know they've got you by the proverbial balls, and you will pay that price for that food. You will pay twice what it cost any time else before that to buy that chicken. That's what will happen, and they will make profit on it, and we will continue to see people like Alice Walton, who has a stranglehold on rural grocery stores all over America, continue to charge astronomical prices, more so than what things cost. You tackle that and you add on what will be crippling tariffs, and we're in for a hellscape. And you think that prices are bad now, but they didn't know, they can't understand that, right? Because they don't have an economic brain.
Yeah.
But it's not malicious. So what do you do?
Yeah. The usual, like, it's always the economy. It's always the economy. It's like that only works for some people. It's not works for everybody. It doesn't work for everybody, but it works for enough people.
Yeah,
that they can sway the balance. These are the people who don't care about the news necessarily. They just care about, like, what's happening at their grocery store, what's happening at the gas pump, and taxes every year. How much did I get back this year? Did I not? This year, I made a little bit more money, but my tax return's not as big as it usually is. It's like, well, okay,
and
never mind.
In 3 years,
we'll move off that.
In 3 years, it's going to be, why am I having to drive 45 minutes to take my kid to school?
Yeah,
because the local school shut down. I don't know. You tell me.
Thankfully, I've got a voucher to the local madrasa, but anyway, it's all good. I could go. We'll talk out.
I think we've given us enough. We've given us enough bandwidth. And for people, I know we have a number of people that tune in from outside the United States.
Yeah,
and just understand, for us, this was seismic, and we had to let it out because we haven't done this in 3
We have to purge.
Yeah, and purge. God, like, Halloween feels like 5 years ago.
I had good costumes too. God damn it.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. Really
hey, just so you know, we have had some people who have commented. So we had Cliff on comics, who actually commented before we started. I love seeing the notifications for you guys, and I love sending them out. I think it's great. I want to send them out more often. And we also had James Figueredo join us today. Good evening, you handsome gents. I am so sorry about the U.S. elections, you guys. And thank you so much, James. And James, you know about insane elections yourself.
He's from Brazil. He knows.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and of course, I put it up a little bit earlier, but for people who are listening, the word caucusocracy has been making the rounds, and yes, it has. Look that up. That's a lot of fun, but also very, very apt. But yeah, thankfully, Brazil also, we've just got rid of our own little dictator wannabe, James. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this will be the next 4 years or so, maybe more. Who knows? But yeah, we'll all get through it because we have the one good thing that always happens when you have I'd say sort of like a government or sort of a social crisis is that art explodes, and we get amazing work from all sorts of people from all parts of society who really, have a lot of emotions to get out, and they get it out on paper, they get it out on film.
I'm really looking forward to music because
absolutely,
it's going to be more For What It's Worth or Ohio than it is Try That in a Small Town. I'm certain of that.
I think some of the best, so when we think about protest music and stuff like that, I think a lot of things that we think about is punk rock, which, by the way, to anybody who's struggling right now, 100% get it right. The most punk rock thing that you can do right now is survive. So do that, because if they don't want you around, you need to be.
Yeah.
But I think some of the best music, the best protest music, the best response to this is going to happen in hip hop, because that is the biggest vehicle for street level music, and I'm excited fucking about it.
You know what? I'm not, because that's already in place. I want the new punk rock. I want even if I can't relate to it. I want the Dead Kennedys of today. I want the X of today. I want the American hardcore of today. Because of who that would speak to.
Yeah.
I agree actually with both of you actually, about what,
even if sonically I can't relate to it, even if it doesn't sound a thing like punk rock, we kind of need it right now. We really do.
And I think we'll get it, and I think it'll be very different from what because when we look at music eras and stuff, we look at, there's the protest rock of the 60s, there was the the origins of rap in the late 70s and the 80s, and punk in the 70s and 80s. And then you had, the grunge, the anti-commercial, anti-capitalist.
Yeah,
grunge.
but then again, fuck Gen X.
But then everything gets commercialized and everything.
As a member of Gen X, fuck Gen X. I don't know what happened there.
But what we might see might be completely...
I guess there really were more people listening to Michael Bolton than Nirvana. I guess there really were.
Well, I don't know. Did some of the members of Nirvana bother to listen to Nirvana? So
why did Novoselic say something?
Oh, I'm sure he has. I haven't cut anything about that dude.
But the thing is, he he's like a Pete Townsend. Depending upon what day you're going to get a different political ideology. Yeah. You remember when I said if there was a museum of rock stars who said stupid things, and Neil Young and Courtney Love and Van Morrison would have their own wings. Pete Townsend and Chris Novoselic would they wouldn't necessarily have a permanent exhibit, but there would be an exhibit. So.
Don't forget about the Memorial Morrissey Annex.
I was going to say Morrissey,
who's been oddly quiet. Well, I also have
and James' response here as a fellow Gen Xer, all I can say is right on, Bill. LOL.
Yeah.
I am also Gen X, but I'm also late Gen X, so
my straight concert husband is 65. He was born in 65, so he just qualifies, just like Rob, just qualifies. Yeah.
I hit the jackpot though. All the Gen Xers in my life are great. So
most are cool.
Thank you.
Most are cool.
Yeah. They'll take care of my little baby millennial ass.
Yeah.
Pun intended.
Yeah.
But speaking of like wonderful, art and the crazy punk music of the future, we've got the crazy punk music of comics to talk about possibly, or what could be, the future of comics here. So
this is interesting. I want to pose this to you guys. What would you consider to be the most punk rock comic ever? I think most people go right to Love and Rockets.
Punk Rock Jesus.
Yeah, okay.
Which is great, by the way. Great.
So, I mean, this is where my analytical brain causes me strife and troubles, right? When you say punk rock, are you talking about thematically, like a book about punk, or just attitude-wise? Because I think The Crow was pretty fucking punk rock attitude-wise.
Yeah.
I wouldn't disagree.
I think that. I mean, my favorite things is Monsters is pretty punk rock attitude-wise.
And there's some things that I think people don't realize how edgy they were in their time. For me,
everything Tom of Finland,
Animal Man,
everything Tom of Finland,
Grant Morrison's Animal Man,
yeah.
I don't think people really appreciate how fucking edgy that book was.
Yeah,
for me, far more so than Sandman. Far more so because of the difference in the topics that were covered.
Yeah.
I
mean, Doom Patrol.
It's a really interesting question. Yeah.
Doom Patrol, the Morrison to the Rachel Pollack Doom Patrol. I mean, that's very punk. A lot of it was very, disjointed and like early punk. Where that they're playing with concepts that they understand, but you're not sure if you've gotten it yet. But like, I mean,
Linda Barry's work,
8 Ball, Linda Barry's stuff, but that, I mean, going back to older stuff, like anything that's comics with an X was pretty damn punk and protest and whatnot. But I mean, it was just lately you've got,
because I think most people immediately go to Love and Rockets, just because it's so completely in alignment thematically, but. All right.
James just suggested The Invisibles. The Invisibles, speaking of Grant Morrison stuff. So The Invisibles was pretty out there.
To me, The Invisibles is more like a rave, though.
Well, then would you throw in Phonogram into something like that? Like
no, Phonogram, no.
Transmit. I was turning around to look at my bookshelf. Transmit.
If I went over to. Yeah, stuff.
Hell, I could say anything that Silver Sprockets is putting out right now.
Yeah.
So, like, PP Poo Poo is actually fantastic. And just anything that they're putting out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot, and I think that's the great benefit of being, here now looking at comics. There is a ton. There is something for everybody, and something
there's going to be something that surprises us soon.
Yeah,
like you said, these are always times for great art, and it might not even be something that you would even consider to be a comic book. We've
had some of those recently.
Graphic literature. It's going to be a good time, I think, on that basis. Yeah. So let's talk about some of the good ones.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
We've got some. I think the selections that we have this week are pretty cool.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Yeah. Well, we do have a couple of big 2 books. Steve and myself both have that. So why don't we start with yours? Because that's probably you're there. The most marquee value one. So
marquee value.
Yeah.
Yes. So I mean, when you think of superhero comic books, I mean, like, the marquee name is Superman. And what DC has decided to do in their post, all in, or like the new all in era, is the new Absolute Universe, which is kind of like their answer to the Ultimate Universe that Marvel had several years back, and are bringing back now. But this Absolute Universe, starting off with a few flagship titles, we've had Batman drop. We've had Wonder Woman. And now we have Absolute Superman, which is the one I'm going to pop up here. And as you can tell right now, the biggest change, in fact, the only change that matters, is Superman has, got his long hair back. And that's all we need to talk about. So he's got a little bit of long hair. Actually, no. So I really enjoyed this book. It's Jason Aaron being very Jason Aaron-y, but in a way where I guess, Caleb, it would be more like his earlier Thor stuff rather than his later Avengers stuff.
Okay.
I think. Just in terms of like the feel of it and the focus that he has. It's not wild and out there, but he does bring in some big concepts and some very interesting changes and reimaginings of not just Superman, like not just the character of Superman, but also the legacy of Superman and the legacy of Krypton. And the way that he has reimagined Krypton is not this scientific paradise where really it's more just, where you have like a bunch of just everybody living in a utopia. Just, I can't wait to be part of the Science Academy and, learn all these things and blah, blah, blah. It is a very stratified world. It is a very elites versus everybody else with a very large downtrodden labor class. And those are the ones who brandish the S. The S in this version of Krypton stands essentially for shame, as in you're not as good as the science people. You're not really up here. The Science Academy, those people, those are the elites. Everybody else, farmers, laborers, miners, servants, they're just beneath them. They're not worth any attention. And I thought that was just really unique. And so we're reintroduced to Lara El and Jor-El here, Superman's parents. And Jor-El he's an engineer working in a mine. And he's treated like garbage from the League of Middle Management, which I thought was kind of an interesting crack. But he's just treated like crap. But his focus is on keeping his people safe. And there's a pending crisis. He knows it. There's a geological problem that's out there, and it's already starting to affect the land. It's starting to affect the people who are most vulnerable to this. So the people from the lower classes, and he knows that they need to do something about it. His wife, Lara, she, was a contender for the Science Academy, but she disagreed with those in charge, and now she's been basically relegated to using all of her intelligence to fix farm equipment and, be a farmer, which again, in this society, beneath them. And that, I think, starts to allow you to understand who this new Superman is, because when we're introduced to the young Kal-El, he's a kid. He's not a baby in this version of the Superman origin. He's actually probably about 10, maybe 12 years old. And so when he leaves Krypton, he has known his parents. He has known that world. He has known that society. And when we're flash forward to the present, or at least the present of this absolute universe, you do have Superman hiding, being anonymous, basically putting himself as the champion for these downtrodden groups. He's saving miners in places that they're being people are being exploited for wealth, and he's keeping them safe. He's doing the work for them in some cases, because he knows that it's dangerous work and he wants to keep them alive. But that's what he's doing. He's kind of doing that in the shadows. He's saving people from explosions. He's saving people from mine collapse. He's saving people from toxic inhalation. And this does not sit well with the Lazarus Corporation, which is kind of the LexCorp of this world. Don't know too much about them yet, and I haven't read Absolute Batman, so maybe they have a little bit more in there about who Lazarus is and what Lazarus is. But we're given some hints. Lazarus uses their version of Pinkertons. In this issue, it takes place in Brazil, and you've got peacemakers, basically a veritable army of peacemakers that are acting as Pinkertons, enforcing Lazarus Company rules for the miners, treating them like chattel. essentially.
If only we knew somebody in Brazil who could go fix it.
Yeah, I know somebody who might be listening to this or watching this very podcast. Anyway, but there's something different there. We're not talking about Lex Luthor here. We're talking about this Lazarus Corp, whoever that is. In the shadows, we're given a hint that there's a certain green, Kaluan that's behind something. That might have something to do with Lazarus as well, and in a shadowed panel. But we're also introduced to another character, and that is Lois Lane, very briefly. And she is not necessarily who we know Lois Lane to be in the normal universe. But I do have to, without spoiling too much, I love the way that that Superman is depicted here. He's younger, so he's maybe more in his early 20s. We do have the return of sort of like a more of an armor suit as opposed to sort of like a fabricated suit. He does have a computer companion that he talks with that also helps regulate his solar energy and all of that. But he's still learning who he is and who he is in this world. But he knows, and he already has sort of a focus that's been given to him by his Kryptonian parents, and then potentially, because we do have a very brief glimpse of it, the Kents as well. But just being introduced to a new Krypton here in this panel. Here's Superman encountering Lois Lane for the first time, and she's one of the Lazarus enforcers who slaps some handcuffs on him. But I do want to draw attention to the artwork. I think the art is great. The work is dynamic. Yeah, it's Rafa Sandoval, just killing it. Beautiful work there. Beautiful colors from Ulysses Areola. I think he's doing a great job as well. And the lettering is from Becca Carey, who I'm not too familiar with her work, but I mean, again, just excellent work here. And this is definitely a premiere title. So DC's doing a great job in this one. And I think this is going to be what we're coming to expect from the Absolute universe and the Absolute versions of these characters. And again, like I said, I haven't read Absolute Batman or Absolute Wonder Woman, but I've been hearing great things about both of them. And then we've eventually got Absolute Flash coming down the pipeline. And I'm
an Absolute Green Lantern and Absolute Martian Manhunter.
Yes. Oh yeah. The designs from that those were. I can't wait for that. And I'm just excited for this. I think it's going to be really cool. Now, again, if you didn't read the DC All In one shot that came out a couple months ago, I'd recommend to start there because it kind of gives you an idea of why this universe potentially is the way it is. And, of course, it's the big D. Mr. Darkseid himself is kind of somehow infecting just the aura or the soul of this universe. And that's potentially why it's the way it is. But yeah, I'm really good. But so James has a comment here. Don't get me started on the Brazil stuff in Absolute Superman. LOL. Yes. And I mean, it's American storytellers kind of wanting to set something in a place where we kind of, narratively assume we understand life. But it is definitely a reimagining of what the status quo is in this world for that Absolute Superman's been into. So Bill, you read this. What do you think?
Yeah, I only got it a few hours ago, and I really liked it. It's very Jason Aaron. Jason Aaron. So it's not Avengers Jason Aaron. It's Thor Jason Aaron.
Yes.
Let's put it that way. And the art, this was as close as I think, and it certainly comes up in some of the pics you posted. It felt. I know that a lot of times I bring up something that I call widescreen comics. And probably the best example of that was the Ultimate line. We have like the DC version of this, and I didn't realize in terms of widespread, like widescreen comics, there's a very Kingdom Come feel in this.
Oh yeah.
Very Kingdom Come feel. It's that level of grandeur. Even though we're not talking about what appears to be gods, because again, Steve, as you talked about, and I think this is a through line for both Batman and Wonder Woman, they're lower down. They're not of the same cast of what we're used to interpreting with these particular characters. And I think Superman is very interesting. I do have Absolute Batman. I do have the sketch covers because that's all I could order because of things that screwed up. And I think these are destined for like Art and Franco because they treat those. But I also really liked going back to the core of Superman and how he originally appeared was as the ultimate New Deal social warrior, FDR Democrat. And that's the version of Superman we get here on Earth. And I'm really fascinated by the, almost like the lost kind of like Easter eggs that we've seen so far about, the enforcers are peacemakers, and what's the story behind that? What's the story behind the Kent farm in disrepair and a sign saying property of the Lazarus Corporation? What's what seems to be a very QAnon version of Brainiac. So like these little Easter eggs that I'm sorry if I spoiled some stuff. Sorry, but what happens. I like what's been peppered in, and I really came with a sense of I can't wait for issue 2 at the end of it. I can't wait for issue 2. So, by all indications, the Absolute line is off to a great start, both in terms of sales and critical appreciation. And I'll be reading those other two very soon. Yeah.
So I have a question. Having not read this, that I'd pose to you guys. So everything y'all said, these are kind of a fresh take on the character. These are a reimagining, a different origin, but they still have the blueprints of the character and stuff like that. All of that, and by the way, that echoes what I've heard from other people say too, and everybody seems to love it. But all of that same stuff kind of categorically was what was said about the New 52 line. These are different takes on the characters.
Oh, so these are way different than New 52.
Well, that's what I'm asking. What is it about the way that this is presented, the way that this is packaged and formulated that is different than that? Because that did not work in this.
New 52 were these characters playing baseball prior to New 52 and then playing baseball in a different league after that. These guys are playing a different sport.
Okay.
These guys are playing a very different sport. And I do think the social position is the most interesting interesting change for all three of these characters, from what I understand, with Batman and Wonder Woman as well. Because
Batman's not a billionaire.
That seems to shake things up more than anything. That the House of L is not one of grandeur. I think that's a huge step towards making this a very remixed version of the character.
Okay.
Well, and also from a marketing standpoint, New 52 replaced everything. Absolute line is in addition to. So this is, it's canon, but it's definitely in a different universe.
It's coexisting.
There is going to be some there's going to be some crossover, obviously, is planned, but people have the choice. If they don't want to read this kind of if they don't want to read the Absolute line, they don't have to. They can just,
if it's not their Superman,
read the Superman that they're used to, read the Batman that they're used to. It's fine. And then this is just sort of like, hey, if you want something different, that's pretty dang cool. And it's written by some really powerhouse, writers, drawn by some really powerhouse artists. I mean, this, is a good option for you. So I recommend it.
But when we do talk about a crossover, don't do it prematurely, please.
Yeah. Oh, I hope not.
Build this world up. Build this world up.
Let it go for a couple of years.
Don't get until we get Absolute Justice League. Do not take that step until this world is crystallized. Please don't do that.
Don't do DCEU stuff here. Don't try to punch through it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I have a DC book to talk about, and that is DC Horror Presents Creature Commandos #1. If you can see there on the credit line, it's David Dastmalchian, the actor. Connection to DC was just playing Polka Dot Man in The Suicide Squad, very close friend of James Gunn. And Jesus Veras is the artist. I'm not really that familiar with this gentleman's work, but it certainly was pretty inspired. And this version of the Creature Commandos takes a lot of cues from the version that originally appeared in the 80s, which was set in World War II. But like Absolute Superman, it's a remix. It's a modern it's some of these same characters in a modern perspective. The Creature Commandos are part of a project called Project M for Monsters, and they are enlisting these individuals, these monsters, these creatures, to do the bidding of the United States government for missions that requires some dirty hands. And what you have here, if you see on the picture there, they really are direct analogs of the characters that came through in the 1980s. November 1980 actually was when they were introduced, but they were in that version a unit of the U.S. Army during World War II. And you'll see there's the Frankenstein version known as Lucky, a secondary Frankenstein monster. You have Myrna Rhodes, a Medusa-ish Gorgon. You have Vincent Velcro, a vampire that came from Brooklyn. You have a gender swap version of the werewolf Griffith, and the normal human who led that, Matthew Shreve. There's also a version of that character there. And as an actor, I think there's a lot of connective tissue in being a storyteller. And I said this before when we were talking about Dreamer. What's the actress's name?
Nicole Maines.
Nicole Maines. Sorry about that. And I know this is not his first time at the rodeo in regards to writing comic books. That he's had a couple of independent projects, all within the horror line. But David is another natural storyteller. There is some familiar faces from the DC universe. This team is ultimately reports to General Ealing. So that's a whole dish of right-wing army activity. And this issue is basically like getting the band together. There's one really horrific sequence involving a zombie, which I'm very interested to see where that goes, whether this is a team member or it's actually what they're going to be faced up against in their first mission. And we also get a Kaluan at the end, who may be the one pulling the strings. So really good first issue. And DC horror, this is DC and horror. This is firmly set in the DC universe, but this is definitely a horror book. And I know that they have like a DC Horror Presents anthology that's coming out in tandem with this. And it seems to be, stuff that operates in a different room from the one that Sandman Universe rents. Really, really good first issue, I thought. And Steve, I think you especially will like this.
Yeah, I did. I read this as well. And I like the, the collecting of the different creatures for the task force. Like basically, just going and introducing them all by capturing them in some way or another. And who played the scientist? The one who's putting together. I forget who played the scientist. Who is the scientist who's putting together?
And I believe that's a character that's appeared in the past with Star Labs.
Probably.
Which makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And she, and she runs this program, and she's like, these are people that are, are at the forefront of, what you call supernatural, but it's just a different kind of science. The way that she describes, I think Shreve says something about like werewolves being stupid or magic or whatever, and she's like, look, there's a moon in the sky that controls 200 trillion tons of water every day. Who's to say that also doesn't have effects on people and on like living biological organisms? Like, it's important to understand that. And so it's all kind of different aspects of science. But just, the way that she kind of, gets into the heads of these different creatures to bring them in and to make them, want to do these missions. But of course, these missions, it might be a little bit shady. In other ways, there might be some kind of other stuff going on there. But I also just kind of
last name is West.
Dr. West,
yeah. West, yeah.
And Mina as well. Mina, the Gorgon Mina, also is a scientist who's working as part of this project, involved very heavily with Lucky. So, and also just to remind everybody that we are less than a month away from Creature Commandos, which is technically the first entry of the new DC, film universe. But we will get another version of the Creature Commandos, where we're going to get a Frankenstein, a Bride of Frankenstein, GI Robot, the Ferret, Nina Mazursky. Weasel. That's what it is. Weasel. Nina Mazursky, which I'm not too familiar with. Her character, she's the one that's kind of like the fish.
Yeah.
The fish character.
I believe she was in Frankenstein Agents of Shade.
Was she in Shade? Yeah,
I believe so. Yeah,
because Shade,
and Dr. Foster
had a little bit of.
We have there too.
Yeah.
Who's the Silver Daddy?
that is.
Do we know who that is?
Yes, it is. It's the father of. He was in Suicide Squad and the Suicide Squad. Sergeant. My God, my brain. Someone better look this up. Rick Flag. That is Rick Flag's father.
Okay.
So yeah, who is also voiced by Joel Kinnaman, who played Rick Flag from the movie. So, yeah.
And I believe the Frankenstein isn't Lucky. I think that's like the more Grant Morrison-y Frankenstein.
Yeah, it's the Agents of Shade Frankenstein, who's a different version.
Yeah, we're not far from that, but also kind of like a nice take that comics are different from films, and that this was the choice that they went with. Yeah,
it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
and David Dalsmalchian, if you're looking for other stuff, his Count Crowley series, I've loved every.
But like I said, natural born storyteller. Yeah,
absolutely.
All right, Caleb. Yeah, we got the DC out of the way.
Let me shift gears for us. I am going to talk about a little mini series that came out from our good friends over at Boom Studios. This was written by Tom King, drawn by Peter Gross, with colors by the ever amazing Tamara Bonvillain. That's how I choose to say her name. But it was super good, and that book is none other than Animal Pound from Boom Studios. And just simply because I needed something lighthearted with animals and absolutely no political subtext or just text at all, and I needed something that just left me feeling great. I thought this would be the one that I would go with. It's not satirical at all. It's just warm and fuzzy puppies. And boy, was I wrong. No, I mean, I knew what this was going into it, right? It's absolutely it's a pastiche, so if you will, of Animal Farm. And it kind of is exactly kind of in line with that. So the story takes place in a pound. And it really takes place with this dog named Lucky. That's where it starts off with. And Lucky is an older dog. He's kind of the elder statesman of the pound, so to speak. And he is talking to a small kitten named Fifi and telling Fifi about his dream of the pound and how they could be free animals one day, and all the dogs and all the cats and all the bunnies could help each other, and they would that they would live as a collective and a community, and they didn't need humans and cages and all that stuff, and they would just be peaceful lives. And so that planted a seed. And this book does play with things that happen in pounds. So man came and got Lucky and took Lucky away, and Lucky never came back. But the seed was planted, right? And so at some point in time in the future, we don't know how many years, but assumedly the animals had grown up a bit. Fifi is older now and has taken the dream of Lucky and has spread it to the other animals and kind of talked to them about it. And Fifi befriends another dog named Titan. And Titan is a bit of a kind of a Doberman Pinscher-esque dog. And he is, he's next in line to get taken away and not come back, right? And they know this, but they have hatched a plan. They are going to unite all the animals, and they are going to unlock the doors, and they are going to push the man out, and they're going to start their own. They're going to live on their own, right? They're going to do what they need to do, and this works surprisingly. Somehow they are able to kind of take over the pound. And when they do so, they all decide that, hey, we're going to be on the same page. We're all animals, yes, but we're better than our base natures. And we're going to, the strong will care for the weak, and the people who have numbers will care for those who don't. The dogs and the cats will work together, and they will protect the rabbits. And as Steve is showing you on the screen, the doors will remain open. And so they have to figure out how to make that work. And they start to form some semblance of governance. And Titan is elected to be the top dog, so to speak, and to lead the group and to set kind of precedent. He's very much a General Washington figure. And after two terms, he steps down, and another animal steps up to take the place, and so on and so forth. And throughout the series, you see how they develop a society. You see how they start to work together to get kibble, to go outside. And this works pretty well for a while. And they have, but eventually, as you might imagine, the food starts to run out, and people get worried, people get scared, and they have to figure out how to do things. And so what goes on through the series is that they discover a webcam that the humans had used to show people the animals and stuff. And so they figure out how to use computers, and they manipulate it, and they go on YouTube and set up a channel and do these really cute things. And this dog named Piggy, a little English bulldog, becomes an internet sensation for all the adorableness that he does. And he's raking in money, and they use the money to buy things on Amazon or whatever the equivalent is. And food is delivered, and it works out really well. And it's for the group. And again, this works great for a limited time. And then things start to fall apart because, somebody decides, hey, I'm a dog. That's a rabbit. I can chase it. I can eat it. And then they put up guardrails. They say, no, we're not going to do that. And they try to make it work in a system. But as with all systems, over time, people figure out a way to manipulate that system for personal gain. And I've heard tell, legend only, of course, that every once in a while, a malevolent, narcissistic, self-indulgent carnival barker of a creature in a person suit or a personality suit can figure out a way to earn money. And by earning money through really things that they were handed, they're able to build a platform and garner support and pull people in. And that that creature in this book is Piggy the Bulldog. Who figures out that, hey, I can manipulate this and I can get in. And even though there's been all of these different other creatures who have had multiple terms and they've gotten out and they've all abided by the guardrails, and we have these norms set up, and we have the law of open doors. Well, that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. I can change this. And it does. And they start to tear at each other and put each other down and manipulate the system. And I'll let you guys go read the book to figure out where it goes and how it inevitably ends and what ends up happening. But we've all, this book is, like I said, it's a play on Animal Farm, right? And it's a play on satire, and it's really good. And Tom King knows what he's doing. And he does this really well. And he develops these creatures' personalities. And he shows them in a very, I like anthropomorphic books. That they're fun for me. I grew up reading, I cut my teeth reading Brian Jacques' Redwall series. That was my favorite kind of books growing up. It's why I fell in love with sword and sorcery and that kind of thing. So this is right up my alley. But he does a really good job of personifying these creatures and showing, especially with animals like Fifi and Titan. One is a cat who has a particular idea of the way the world would work, and the other one is a dog who also wants the world to work good, but sets up these guidelines and leaves it after he steps out, leaves it for the animals to either put up or shut up. Right? He left you with something more than what you had, and it's up to you to figure it out, to make it work. And if the people decide to throw that in the bin, then so be it. That's their decision. He can't force them to do anything, and won't use power to prevent other people who have power from corrupting that system. So it's really, really interesting the dynamics that he's playing with here. And just the art is outstanding. The line work that you're seeing here.
Beautiful pages.
Peter
Beautiful
Gross, just the nib work that you get is absolutely stunning. And just, I really don't know how to describe it. And on some degree, it reminds me a little bit of, it's too late in the night. My brain shut off. Who drew We Three?
Quietly.
Yeah. It reminds me of Frank Quietly quite a bit. Maybe a little Raphael Grandpa thrown in there too, as far as a New Age artist goes. But just the depiction of the different breeds of animals, different species of animals. If you want to see a really great depiction of fear, look at some of these images that he draws of rabbits. I mean, it's just pure distilled fear in the eyes of these creatures who really, it's funny the way that they set this up in this book as far as the voting goes and the power dynamic. They vote by weight. And so the more creatures who have the higher numbers and reproduce faster, aka rabbits, are actually, even though they have, they don't live as long and they're smaller and frailer and stuff like that, they have power in numbers because they collectively weigh more. And so the cats and the dogs have to like barter with them and do some social bargaining to get them on their side and say, hey, we'll treat you better than they will, or they'll, this person, we need to follow them to get the numbers on their side, so that it literally balances the scales of this weird kind of republic that they've set up with animals, and they're this strange democracy that they try to invoke. So I found it fascinating. I think it was fun. I don't know that it was necessarily the best week to read this, as I was, obviously affected and colored by happenings in real life. Made me want to pour a hot bath, crack open a bottle of red, and maybe open a vein there for a little bit. But
okay, Marat.
Yeah, right. But this was really well done. The collective storytelling from both the writer and the artist was well done. It made you absolutely tear into who these creatures were in the future and the hope that they had. And really, it also goes back to this notion that both, at least Fifi and Titan, had deified Lucky and Lucky's dream in a way that made sure that it would never be fulfilled. And so it was the deification of that dream that really corrupted the system in totality, and allowed other people to co-opt it and degrade it to the point that it was, a shell of what it could have been. They corrupt, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, which is, I think, an ongoing theme of a lot of these type of stories. But highly encourage people who enjoy good satire to go check this out and read it. It's not funny satire in the way that we see some of the some modern storytelling being done. I'm reminded of the Flintstones. I'm terrible with names tonight, apparently. But
Mark Russell.
Mark Russell. Yeah, I'm reminded of Mark Russell. Right, writes really great satire, but it's always funny. This is not a humorous book, but it's good. It's a good satire nonetheless. I think it takes the better parts of I was expecting the big Indians to come in here, right? Or the Lilliputans to come in here, because that book is not nearly as funny as some other books are, although it does have its more comedic moments. But this is just really well done, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm glad I read it. And
yeah, has Peter Gross, the artist, who's a great artist, has he done anything since Unwritten?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, that's a name I have not heard in a long time. And
I loved his work in Unwritten. It was
it was beautiful. He did great work in Lucifer. It's just not a name I've heard in quite a long time. So I'm glad, Lucifer, especially with a project like this, which just really seems to really cater to his talents. That's great.
Let's see here. Let me pull up Comic Vine, and that usually will do a really good job of kind of telling me things. So The Unwritten obviously is his biggest book to date. Barely. Books of Magic is right behind.
He did some Mark Millar stuff. It looks like.
Yeah, he did.
The Dollhouse Family with Joe
American Jesus.
American Jesus. I think the more recent one is, like I said, Dollhouse Family, that was from the Hill House comics.
Yeah. I like that one. That was an interesting.
That looks to be the most recent thing. I don't see anything.
Okay.
Which I didn't read the Dollhouse Family. I should have. I need to go back and check that out.
Okay.
It's a bizarre one. Yeah. It doesn't go the direction I thought it would, to be honest.
Is this collected yet?
It should be soon.
Okay.
Let me see.
Because that's what I was, especially with Boom's price points. That was what I was waiting for on this. Forgot to pre-order one.
I'll tell you shortly.
Yeah. No problem.
I've been over here totally putting in orders too while we were talking.
Oh, it looks like they're going to be putting out a hardcover.
Well, that's not good for me.
And it is out. It is out in hardcover.
Okay.
Yeah. $29.99.
Yeah, I think that's everything I'm seeing. There's a hardcover that you can get.
Yeah. Okay.
But surely they're going to do a soft cover.
They'll definitely be a soft cover.
That doesn't make sense for them not to.
I don't. Yeah. Okay. Steve, you have another independent?
I do, and it is
my independent is sort of kind of an independent, but not really. So why don't we keep going? We'll do Steve's, and then we'll do Caleb's, and then we'll do mine.
Okay. Yeah. So I read, and this is a YA book. Actually more for like middle grades, but it's pretty serious and emotional enough for anybody over the age of like 10 to just absolutely love it. And that is Trung Nguyen's The Magic Fish. And it is a beautifully written, beautifully drawn graphic novel about a first generation Vietnamese American boy and his mother, who had emigrated. Both of his parents immigrated from Vietnam in the early 80s. But they're on the surface, it's a way that they're trying to find a way to communicate with each other. His mother, who communicates in some English, but mostly in Vietnamese, especially in like the way she understands the world, and her son Tien, who grew up in the U.S. and has grown up speaking English. And the way that they do this, the way that they bridge the communication gap, is through fairy tales. And one of the really amazing things about this book is that the way that Trung draws the stories that the two read each other is very much informed by the reader, like whoever is reading the fairy tale, the way that people appear, the way that they're dressed, the way that they look, how they speak, the way that it's represented on the page and in the panels is very much informed by what they understand, what they imagine this fairy tale to be. So when Tien is reading a story about Cinderella, he's picturing a more European, he's picturing more Ghibli style, design. Cool. And when his mother is reading about, or his mother is hearing a story of Cinderella, the Vietnamese version of Cinderella, Tam and Cam, she's hearing it from her aunt in Vietnam, and everybody's very Vietnamese as they would appear in the 50s. So like sort of, French style dress or very traditional, Vietnamese dress, just the imagery and everything. It's very interesting. And then the final story, of course, is The Little Mermaid, and it's a mix of the two because they're reading it to each other. The very heart of this story is young Tien is gay. He knows he's gay. He's out to his two friends, but he doesn't know how to tell his mother because he doesn't know the word, and he doesn't know how his mother is going to take this because she's going through very emotional things as her mother passes away, who she hasn't seen in years since before, since she's immigrated to the U.S. And he doesn't know how to present himself because as a child of immigrant parents, he has a lot of pressure to succeed and to be the fulfillment of their dreams. And at the same time, you also hear the voice of the mother in kind of trying to communicate with her son as well. So it's from both perspectives, and it's a beautifully drawn book. I've got a couple panels here. He uses color very clearly to denote where or how the story is being presented. So red is the color of life in America, the present. Yellow is the past and his mother's, emigration from Vietnam, or she was a boat person. She escaped Vietnam. And blue is the color of the fairy tales. So it's just these beautiful pieces throughout that represent very many things. The interpretation of the reader, the interpretation of the mother and the son, and like the history. It's just great. And if you love fairy tales, you'll love this book. If you love interpretations of fairy tales, you're going to love this as well. And it does have a very beautiful ending that, of course, brought me to tears because why wouldn't it? I cry at Hallmark commercials, and this is definitely way beyond the emotional power of a Hallmark commercial. So just beautiful. And if you love fairy tales, holy crap, you're going to love this book. So
in terms of the art, and given your husband's love for Janet Leigh, have you showed him this?
Oh, he'll be reading this. Oh, he will. Okay. He actually has to because we're going to be talking about this at our queer book club this weekend. So he is going to be reading this.
This seems like something that would be right up his street.
Oh, absolutely. And even Trung Le Yuen, in the afterword, he talks about how he designed some of the dresses because he based them off of actual, fashion, actual design from different fashion eras of the 20th century. So it's just it's really fantastic. Very detailed.
So just in this panel alone, it's a different aesthetic, but it has a Santa Toccata feel as well, for like a monstrous.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think if Trung is what other work he's done. I think this is really his main work. And he's been like since he did do design in university, like that's kind of his focus is graphic design. I'm sure that he's gotten some inspiration from like Sana and like a couple other artists that kind of bridge that gap between Eastern East Asian kind of representation and art styles with more of an American comic art, sequential art style. So I mean there's a little bit, and I won't even say it, like there's a tiny little bit of like manga-esque type art
but
here,
also
but it's
going way different. Back I'm also seeing Winsor McCay.
Oh god, yes there's a very classic feel of like Little Nemo here as well, just
or ElfQuest.
The thought of a Winsor McCay manga is appealing. I have to say that is very appealing.
I mean, who's to say that Winsor McCay didn't inspire a lot of manga artists early on as well?
And Steve, what was the publisher on this?
This is actually Random House. It's specifically RH Graphic.
Okay, great.
They're sort of like graphic novels
for people if they want to search that out. That looks really interesting.
Absolutely. But yeah, it is. It's great. It should be easily available. Most
And the
places.
price point?
The one I have is $18 US, 24 Canadian.
For something, I assume it's like hovering around the 175 pages or so.
No, it's about
long.
250.
Awesome.
Oh, you can't beat that.
That's great.
Yeah,
Bill, you were throwing out names there. I was thinking Richard Pini too.
Oh yeah, it was a little bit. Yeah,
yeah. Okay, cool. All right, Caleb. Yeah, go ahead. What else do you have to say, Steve?
Oh, it's just I totally recommend it.
Okay, cool. Okay, Caleb, over to you.
I see your YA book, and I raise you just a straight up adult book. So I'm really excited.
Which you can't really show the interiors of, which sucks.
Very few. I'm really excited. I've actually been waiting for a while to talk about this, and I really kind of wanted to talk about it whenever we could get our other half on the show too. I just wasn't sure when that's going to be. But yeah, and I know, and the reason being is because if it had not been for Brian, then I would not have been, introduced to Zan Christensen and Northwest Press, which means I would not have gotten my hands on Horny High, which is published in the U.S. by Northwest Press, and obviously written and drawn by Ed Firth for my enjoyment. That's the only way I knew this existed. I'd never heard about this before. So when I heard Zan pitch it and talk about it, I was like, oh no, I need that. So this book is a collection of the series Horny and High, which is a couple of different kind of mini stories written by Ed Firth that really kind of focus on British hookup culture in the mid 90s and the chemsex kind of party culture movement, a lot of otters, a lot of kind of butch guys. And for the first half of the first story, and you get some really great different stories here. And I love the one it starts off with something called Profiles, where it's just Ed drawing all of these different profiles that you might see on Grindr or Growler or Scruffed or something like that. And some of the cliches and just art, and to a degree it's just eye candy if you like otters, which is really funny. But then it gets into the story and talks about, the story of the night bus, where you see just watching people on a bus coming home from a night of just debauchery and partying and the things that they're doing and who they are. For me, one of the most important stories in here is really focusing on orgy culture in the chemsex culture. It is a flop house, so to speak, where people come in and they take a lot of stims, a lot of amphetamines are taking, and they have raucous wild sex, and they lose track of time, and they might be in there all weekend and stuff like that. And it just seems you're sitting here reading this and you're watching people literally lose their mind as the drugs take over, and then as they do things with people and don't use protection and stuff like that, especially during the 90s. And you're just sitting here wondering, it's like, oh, this is just straight up hedonism and debauchery. And this is cool because you also get to see some really great drawings of sex, right? Of some scruffy hot guys doing what they want to do to each other. And that's nice. But then the last few pages of the story just kind of breaks your heart. In some really hard ways, as they're talking, this one guy is just messy and just passes out on the couch and just starts snoring, and everybody just kind of ignores him because he's kind of ruining the vibe and stuff like that. Turns out it was his respiratory system shutting down, and he never woke up. And then the weeks after this, the guy starts losing touch with a bunch of friends for reasons, and then we find out that these other they find them in various states. And again, it goes from just it's a hard shift, right? It goes from just being this debauchery and weirdness and drug culture and hedonism and fun to loss and despair and fear in a few very short pages and in a short story. I mean, I've read 250-page graphic novels that had a hard time with that transition, and Ed Firth does it in a couple of pages, and I find that fascinating. He utilizes different line works. He utilizes different color schemes. One of my favorite stories in here visually is basically a story about hooking up with strangers in the woods. But it's all, I can show you this page, right? It's it's not quite monochromatic, but it's very toned down. You know, it's a lot of just light pinks, some kind of darker, maybe blues, light grays and stuff like that, and it just kind of uses that color throughout the story. And I think it's visually striking. And of course, there's pages I can't show you on that, but it tells an interesting story of you know, of hookup culture, right? And something that we don't have a lot of anymore. So at least in this, like, there's not. I mean, I've heard tell that the pattern of cruising in parks and stuff is actually making a resurgence. People are doing that again. I don't know to what degree it is, but it's interesting seeing Ed Firth draw it here. You know, and show how, at least in this very particular area, in this very particular time, what life might have been like for him or for people around him.
You said these are all set in the 90s?
Yeah. Late 90s to 2000s.
Okay. Is there any activity at a place called Club Shame?
Not that I saw in here.
Okay.
I don't think names and locations may have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike.
I mean, the term chemsex didn't really exist then. But you know, there was like a gay exponent of rave culture, and
2010. Sorry, I was misplacing the time.
Okay. Yeah. So because like my ears picked up because, you know, as somebody who went to Limelight a few times, you know, and that was its own kind of vibe. I wasn't really aware when I did make my annual trips to London, but there was I had heard tell of a club in Brighton called Club Shame, which really was kind of that was, you know, like how the Straits had Manchester and the Hacienda and clubs like that, like Brighton, which is, you know, kind of a vacation destination, had a very thriving gay culture, and it was centered around a club called Club Shame. So that's why I was asking. How long are the stories?
They're relatively short, right? So I mean, they can go anywhere from there's some 2-pagers in here. There's some 8-pagers in here. All in all, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stories in this collection. And it runs about 68, 69 pages from front to back.
69 pages, you said?
68. I mean, I guess technically, if you count this back cover, it's 69. But there's some good back matter in here too. Like, you learn a lot about Ed Firth, and it says that this was his first graphic novel series exploring addiction and romance and underground gay subcultures in 2010's London. It's informed by his experience as a chemsex support key worker at the charity Controlling Chemsex, providing one-on-one addiction support to clients across the UK. So this comes from some real life experience and some real life social work that he did.
Okay.
So
very cool.
Yeah. I mean, I love
friends at Northwest Press.
Yeah. I mean, I love this too. And it is a quick read. I mean, the stories are relatively short, and it's very, very graphic. So definitely not for the squeamish or somebody who doesn't want to see, you know, very in your face gay sex. I also like that on the back, and this made me happy because I'm a huge fan of his, but Ralph Koenig has a little blurb: tells the truth only the gut understands.
Yep.
And, you know, his work takes very much this scene, very much in the 80s or 90s, the gay scene in Germany, and doesn't shy away from all of like the warts and the, you know, the ugly side of it, as well as the fun hedonistic side of it. But his stuff is usually done more for humor's sake. This is not. This is very, I think, real. And a lot of the way that it depicts sort of just the, you know, the selfishness, but also sort of like the concern. I mean, there are people who are just there, you know, just for themselves, and other people who actually, you know, take the time, even in a few panels, just to show that they care about the other people. They might not know their names. They may not, you know, ever see them again, but there's a
I'll probably never see you again.
Yeah. I'll be inside you, but I won't see you.
One of my favorite pages.
Never see you again.
One of my favorite pages in the story. These two guys are hooking up in the woods, and that one guy's going down on the other, and the guy who's receiving the fellatio is like, "Hey, do you mind if I smoke some meth?" And the other guy like leans up, he's like, "No, go right ahead." I'm just like, what? In the woods?
Sure.
Really? What do you do? Cool. It's worth it. Go support our friends at Northwest Press. We need more of them.
Okay, for myself, my book could not be more different.
Or is it?
So we're going to reel back to something that certainly would be appropriate for young adults. In 1964, a revolutionary animated series called Johnny Quest had a one-season run on ABC in prime time.
Only one season?
It was only one season. Then it came back in the 80s, and they had more episodes in the 80s. And then in the 90s, they had the Real Adventures of Johnny Quest, which were, like hyper, like graphic and very, very, very 1997. But the original series dates back from 1964. It was created by Doug Wildey, who has both a history in animation and in comic books. So the show had a very comic book feel, and it followed the adventures of 11-year-old Johnny Quest, basically going around the world in adventures on the boat that his father, who was a super scientist, Dr. Benton Quest, owned. They were joined by his faithful dog Bandit and his friend from India, Haji, and also Ray Spannon, which was probably the first boner for many gay men growing up in the 1960s. As kind of jack of all trades who basically assisted the quests going around. And in terms of comic books, and this is one of the biggest shames of a series that has never been reprinted. Kamiko had this fantastic series based on Johnny Quest that lasted 40 issues in the 80s. Some of the best comics I have ever read. They were written, though there were a variety of artists, they were all written by William Messner Loebs. And some of the most touching, wonderful stories ever, and it's such a shame that they've never been reprinted. If you do seek them out, there's an early issue, which I believe is issue 5, which actually tells the story of Johnny's mother's death. And the big one for me, with an absolutely beautiful Bill Sienkiewicz cover, is number 13, which is for me the most emotional comic book I've ever read, which talks about a dog napping ring, and that catches Bandit, and Bandit is going to be used as a bait dog for the stronger dogs, for practice. They're going to kill him for practice. And there's a sequence that is, as far as I'm concerned, up there with Watchmen 4 in terms of just literary brilliance, talking about it comes from the perspective of a dog who's dying of his injuries, remembering what it was like to be a pet and live in the backyard. Oh, baby, it's going to level you if you have a heart. But just going back, it's a crying shame that we do not have any of that reprinted. And luckily, it's cheap if you do seek it out. But we have a new Johnny Quest series from Dynamite. Steve, I know you have a graphic. There's been the 4th issue came out today, but I have the Free Comic Book Day preview and then the first 3 issues here, so I can tell you what transpires in this particular series so far. So it's actually set in 1964 initially, which is it's nice that they placed it right where the original series took place, but not for long. So I'll tell you what happens. So Dr. Benton Quest has invented a device, and let me just get the full name of it. He goes on about it, called the quantum counter, which is meant to enable a greater understanding of temporal superposition by collecting and quantifying subatomic particles for deeper study. Okay, MacGuffin. So there is this device. They're on their ship, the Sequest, and there's a great storm, and they land back in their fictional home of Palm Key. It's never clear if it's on the East Coast or the West Coast, but it's a key, and it's called Palm Key. And they come upon the island that they live on, and none of the structures look the same. And then they see the sea view, and it clearly has not been used in many, many years. It's junked. And as Johnny and Haji and Bandit are exploring the island, they see the graves of both Johnny's father and Race. And they decide they're not going to say anything. This is all too weird. And through scientific know-how and deduction, they find out that they're in the future, and it's the future of 2024. So who comes to greet them but 71-year-old Johnny Quest? Sees his younger version and eventually starts helping the Quest team decide, figure out what happened. This device was in a storm while they were sailing, and they ended up, effectively back on the island, but 60 plus years later. And things are very different. But again, since Dr. Quest is a bit of a futurist, he's not that uncomfortable. But again, that they know that there are that they're causing a time anomaly and they have to get back. So that's what they're set out to do. The device itself will be able to help that, but they need replacement parts. Eventually, Quest was thinking, God, nobody has parts like this. And the 71-year-old Johnny Quest goes on Amazon and is like, oh, we can get them anywhere. But the ones that are most compatible are functional parts that are in Japan, so that they decide that they're going to go, just to make sure that everything works perfectly, go to Japan to get this. But of course, it's the Quest family, and nothing's that simple. And there are dark forces after them. There's also an assassin that comes to knock these guys off. It doesn't exactly go well, but she looks very familiar to the members of the Quest team, because a mercenary that they always dealt with back in the day was one called Jezebel Jade. And there were many times that Race Bannon and Jezebel Jade got caught in some compromising positions, and this young woman named Jasmine looks a lot like Jezebel Jade and a little bit like Race. So this is likely the granddaughter. And it's really a fun excursion. The writer is Joe Casey, who has a very long lineage with comic books. The artist is Sebastian Pires, and like any Dynamite book, there's a plethora of artists that take care of the covers. The main cover for this one was Nardi, but there's also versions by Chris Somney. I got a weird one. Jay Lee is a beautifully nuanced artist. This is a bit creepy. I shouldn't have gotten this one. But just beautiful, beautiful covers. They're up to the 4th issue. I've read up to the 3rd issue. 4th will be in my next DCBS box, but it definitely, definitely tips the hat to the original series, which was really way ahead of its time as a sort of adult cartoon, though certainly kids could enjoy it. And it's nice that it literally brings it to the current day. It literally brings a 1964 property to the current day and does it in a very novel way. And just like Space Ghost from Dynamite, this is another very welcome reinterpretation of the Hanna-Barbera characters. So very happy with this.
James was asking about the Johnny Quest comic. This is probably the Comico one. Was Chuck Dixon?
No, it was all William Messner Lowe's. Yeah. There was a Jezebel Jade miniseries, and there was a a Johnny Quest classic, which basically took stories from the actual art from the TV series. But I don't believe Chuck Dixon was ever involved in this. I'll double check, but I'm almost certain it was William Esterlos through the entire run. I do think the Kuberts did some stuff, but I'll take a look on Mike's Amazing World while we're at it. Yeah, go ahead.
Wasn't there? There also was that DC sort of revamp that happened several years
Future
back.
Quest. Yes.
Future Quest. So you had the Johnny Quest properties. You had Space Ghost. You had a couple other, the old Hanna-Barbera characters that were sort of revitalized and brought sort of, to a DC sensibility. But I can't remember who did those.
Airboy. That's That's what that tracks.
Yeah, right. Yeah, James just checked. He was mistaken for Airboy. The Kuberts did work on the Johnny Quest Comico book, though.
Which is an amazing. I mean, say what you want to about the guy's personal views, but that's an amazing series.
Yeah. And I'm just looking at some of the artists. It was William Messner Loebs who did the entire run, but looking at some of the artists that were involved in this, Joe Staten, Adam Kubert, just Mark Hempel, Wendy Peeney, again on covers Bill Sienkiewicz, Dave Stevens, Doug Wildey himself, Ken Stacy. Just really good work.
I like living in this weird world that we have where we've mentioned the Peenies twice tonight, just in different reasons. Of course that happens.
Yeah.
Also, yes, Dave Stevens.
ElfQuest everywhere.
Yeah.
ElfQuest, man. Yeah. No, that is pretty neat. Like I've never been a huge fan of Johnny Quest myself. But I've always seen it sort of like in in between. Like there's always other things that are kind of hitting me at a different time. So I never really got into that when I was younger. And older, didn't really get into that version of it. Now, obviously, Venture Brothers is a total sort of satire on the whole Johnny Quest thing. But I think that's probably a lot of people might kind of understand what Johnny Quest is through that lens. But it does sound really fun to just go back and actually kind of get that classic,
right.
This is the original, and then see it now. Like, what if it were in 24?
Yep.
So that's pretty neat.
Yeah, and it
just the dynamite to do that.
The Jezebel Jade miniseries is all Adam Kubert art.
Oh, okay.
So, and William Messner Loebs scripts again.
Nice.
So, yeah. Cool. So get this, and also if you can find some Johnny Quest, and also the Johnny Quest stories, they're all done in ones. They're all done in ones. 31 issues of done in one stories. So I think they're very much worth seeking out, especially number 13. Have tissues at the ready.
I don't want to read about dogs being sad. We three and Pride of Baghdad were enough to break me.
Facts. Facts.
For me, this has nothing. This has nothing on We Three and Pride of Baghdad. This has nothing on Stray Dogs. This has nothing on those.
Oh, Stray Dogs.
This has nothing on that stuff. This is nothing on the Sad Ace, the Bat Hound stories. This is nothing on Dextar's origin. Nothing. This will level you. If you love animals, it'll level you. Okay. Let's not go out on that note.
I was going to say, we got real sad. Like everything else we've talked about tonight, that's the thing that actually got me. And I'm just depressed.
Yeah.
I was ready to survive everything now, but now I don't know anymore.
Well, one thing that might cheer you up is when we show off our Geek Gets. So it's been 3 weeks. We all have something to show off, something we got in the interim. Steve, sometimes you bitch that you don't have anything, but you do have something. So let's see.
Yeah. Well, first off, I have a really cool Dazzler poster in the back there that is just one of the many gifts that I get from A Pennyworth's Comics in Charlotte, North Carolina. But one thing that I did get for myself, and I know, Bill, you're going to be talking about it a little bit later. We've brought it up a lot of times, but the Disney Insider Rewards program that's been going around, that's been active for several years. They always have a lot of interesting stuff that you can pick up, and sometimes Funko Pops that I normally wouldn't expect to want to get, and usually I don't see them in those places. But I picked up a Helena Shaw from the last Indiana Jones movie, The Dial of Destiny, and I really enjoyed Helena Shaw in that movie. So, now I have a Funko Pop of her, and probably am not going to see this anywhere else. So I'm glad I got it through Disney Insiders using some points. So,
all right, cool. Over to Caleb. Caleb, show off some of your geek kits.
All right. Well, first, I got this really cool shirt that says "Chicken Nuggets."
I love that shirt.
Gay. So
I love that shirt.
I went on a little bit of a shopping spree and picked up some albums because you guys know music is life. So first and foremost, I have Sometimes I Might Be an Introvert by one of my favorite hip hop artists who is out today, Little Sims. I don't know if you guys are familiar with her, but she's amazing. Little 90s metal band that probably nobody's ever heard of.
No, they're grunge.
That's a cool story. That's cute. And then also Ministry's second album, Twitch, which is phenomenal. It's wonderful. And we're gonna end on that one. So happy Caleb with really good music.
Okay. I have an album to show off too. Now this band's last album kind of threw me for a loop and Caleb for a loop. Because it was released at the height of the pandemic in 2022. It was an album called Will of the People, and it could be very misinterpreted as basically like an anti-vax storyline.
Yeah.
Yet reading it, Matt Bellamy is not that way at all. And I was really surprised at that. So, but lyrically, it's fucked up. It really is fucked up. It's really misleading. But no, he is vaccinated, and he's done commercials for the BBC about getting vaccinated, so we don't have to worry about that. But the same band, Muse, back in 2006, released what I think is their landmark album, Black Holes and Revelations. And this is the first time I've had it on vinyl. I haven't popped it out yet. And I got this when I worked at our New York office at 30 Rock for the day on like a week from Monday. And there's a record store right within Rockefeller Center. It's one of the Rough Trade locations. And I didn't pick it up at this time, but that was also the first time I heard Jeff Buckley's Grace on vinyl. And it's already a very warm album, and it was even more inviting. So I think that's going to be one of my next vinyl purchases. And it's funny because Caleb showed off Twitch, and Twitch was one of those albums that came along at the same time. And I even remember what albums they were. It was the Costello Show's King of America, and it was Joe Jackson's Big World, and it was the Sting Double Live album, and The Queen is Dead by the Smiths. I had just gotten to the point where I was buying albums first on CD and not getting the vinyl. And, something I think people forget is a lot of times they weren't released at the same time. It would be like a month or two wait to see if there was the demand to see if they would release it on vinyl. But Twitch was, I think, a concurrent release, and I only ever got, I think, a concurrent release, but I only ever got that on CD. But it's nice to see that stuff still having an afterlife in that kind of format. So it's such a good album, and I love Ministry. I love almost all of their output, but I don't. I think they definitely lost the plot.
I think, even their last album, Goddamn White Trash, like I think it's great for what it is. But I really enjoy that band. But for most of my life, I've just known them as an industrial band, and I'd never given much attention to their first three albums, and they're phenomenal. and it's not I mean, it's industrial to a point, but it's more new wave, right?
No. Oh no,
you don't think so?
disagreeing on that. Yeah, I mean, With Sympathy is new wave to the hill.
Yeah,
but when you get into Twitch, I mean,
Twitch definitely.
It was Depeche Mode to a very darker degree.
Yes, I'll agree with that.
Yeah, now, so I would definitely characterize those as industrial. I think there's some elements, just because of the temper of the time and the technology that was around, that they certainly, it wasn't uncommon to see them lumped with a band that was definitely not industrial, like Berlin. I don't think, but I definitely think that those are.
Well, Twitch has like a track or two that's just industrial. It's purely industrial sound, right? There's not even any lyrics in there, which is a big departure. So you start to see them moving more so in that direction. But like I said, with Sympathy is just new wave all the way, and it's an amazing example of that. I don't think it gets nearly enough credit, and I absolutely love those albums.
Also, their Wax Trax singles were much heavier than With Sympathy.
Yeah,
much heavier. I think by the time of The Land of Rape and Honey,
Oh, it's already you've got a foundation.
I will respectfully disagree with you. I think there's some 90s albums. I think there's some early 2000s albums that are La Bamba.
Okay.
But definitely an important band. I just think there's times they've gone in circles a little bit. So.
Yeah, but I mean, I've listened to their entire catalog. I enjoy it for what it is. I think with any band, when you the Rolling Stones have also put out way too much music, and they didn't have some great ones either. But I think all in all, there's a lot of good stuff in there.
There's La Bamba in the Stones catalog.
Yeah, there is, right? I mean, you put out that many. You put
Black
out that
and
many
Blue. That's a big La Bamba.
Stuff. Yeah.
Ooh, that's a boo. Woo, is that a stinker? Yeah, no, there's some stinkers. There's a few bands that I don't think have that they've never put an album that's not worth owning. For me, some short-lived band. No, I actually don't hate. What's the second album with Ripper Owen? I forget. Bullet Train is on. What the hell? Demolition.
Oh yeah,
that's pretty fucking awful. But I think most of Priest are okay. Ram It Down is out of the Halford albums. That's definitely the worst.
I'm not Rock-a-Rolla. They're
still finding their sound. I wouldn't, and just to think of the leap between Rock-a-Rolla into Sad Wings of Destiny.
Oh, facts.
That I mean, that it's like there's like 4 unrecorded albums. It feels, to that jump. I think every Manic Street Preachers album is, and I want to talk about like really short-lived bands, like the Velvet Underground. I mean. 3 or 4 of them, but I think there's a few. There's Costello has a few clunkers, unfortunately. The Who does. Ooh, it's hard. Ooh, baby.
I think any band, if you're around long enough and you're putting out active work, you're gonna have stuff that doesn't hold up to the test of time.
I think the Beatles, because we're really talking about 10 studio albums, but there isn't one that isn't worth owning.
Yeah,
I think they do that.
I don't think Mastodon has put out a bad album yet, as far as modern bands.
Yeah. One artist with a shit ton of albums, which I think are all worth it. The singer who used to be in Soft Cell, Mark Almond.
Okay.
I think every one of his albums, they're all. I mean, there's some different. Some are so different, man. There's one of all like Russian lullabies, but they're all worth it. But that would be interesting, like the I guess that's like the musical equivalent of the Rockford Files being one of the few series that didn't jump the shark. We should think about that a little bit.
Florence and the Machine hasn't put out a bad album yet.
Yeah, they're REM. There's one clunker in there, as far as I'm concerned. Husker Du never put out a bad album. All the Husker Du albums are worth it.
Somewhere Wendy is smiling.
Yeah. I have to look.
Anyway, we've gone off the we've gone off.
We're way off the thing.
Really got off that path.
Let's get it back. All right, and we're at like 11:22 and 1:49, so that's not bad. That's not bad. It's not like we're past 2 hours. So we're gonna wrap this episode of the Comic Book Bears up. And when we do wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears podcast up, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week. In the bear community, if you find a fella attractive, you woof at him. And we do something very similar. That was a little bit crazy there. Sorry.
That was aggressive.
Yeah.
I like
it. I felt a little bit of.
Well, sometimes you get lonely, you have to drag it out. So anyway, so in the bear community, if you find a fellow attractive, you woof at him. We do something very similar here, where we woof at something which may be comic book or comic book related, but it also may be a film or a TV program or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener or viewer, may be interested in sampling. I'll start as I always do with Steve. Steve, what is your woof of the week?
My woof of the week is The Franchise. It is an HBO series that makes fun of the making of a superhero franchise film in the vein of a Marvel movie and all the ridiculousness and absurdity that goes on behind the scenes. It focuses mostly on the first assistant director and just the insanity that he has to put up with between movie producers, between studio heads, studio execs, the architect of the entire, cinematic universe, and of course, the stars themselves, which go completely nuts as well. So everybody's crazy. It's all ridiculous. And it's by Armando Iannucci, who's very famous for a lot of these types of series. So, but yeah, I totally recommend it. It's available on HBO, or if you have Max, you can just stream it there. It's got, I think it's an 8-episode series, so it's got a couple more episodes left before.
Okay, so. I have very little battery left in my computer, so I'm gonna skip over Caleb and go next because you might lose me really quick, and I don't want to go across the room to get the charger. So my woof of the week goes out to something Steve talked about earlier, which is the Disney Movie Insiders Awards program that recently ended. It was a fun ride. Both Steve and I got a lot of the Disney cover comic books and Funko Pops, and for me, home media. So I used my last batch of points. I got a nice set of stuff here, including Finding Nemo and Finding Dory on Blu-ray. I got the Funko Pop of Luca Pagora on land from the Luca movie. And I had a few points left. I got a Strange World sticker set. I haven't seen this movie yet, but at some point I will. So
it's good. It's a fun movie.
I really do hope that companies do enact some of these reward programs again. They all seem to be dying. They're all a lot of fun, and hopefully, like a phoenix, they will rise again at some point.
Yeah.
So that's my.
I'll miss it for sure. I'll miss it. Sure.
If I bail, I'm sorry, but that's the technology. So Caleb, over to you. What is your wolf of the week?
Okay, before I get to my wolf of the week, I want to send out some love from all of us to our friend Ed Luce. Just real quick.
Yes.
Yes. Just for those of you who know Ed or are around in Ed's orbit, you know why. But just a lot of love and hugs to our lovable oaf, especially this week. But my wolf of the week goes out to a new album. Again, music has just taken over my life, and that is we have after I think 16 or 18 years, a new album by the band The Cure. And this is Songs of a Lost World. And I'll be very honest with you, I did not have very high hopes for this album. I didn't know what to expect. I wasn't really expecting much of anything. Okay, so we're getting a new record from this band, and it's not, after this much time, what's it going to sound like? They haven't missed a beat. It sounds like it could have been recorded 18 years ago. It is phenomenal. The music and the sound and the voice is everything you want it to be from a Cure album. It falls in line perfectly, and I have listened to this repeatedly since it came out. It feels like exactly what it should be, and I don't know, I don't know if younger audiences are tapping into this the way that some of the way that I am. I'll be curious to see if this is leading people to The Cure, but for somebody who is a fan of this band and has been for a long, long time, it's exactly what I wanted The Cure to be. and it sounds like they are in their prime. Absolutely. So go check out The Cure Songs of a Lost World. That is my woof of the week.
You know, and they actually put on a concert that they live streamed, where they did perform the entirety of the album. I guess it was like maybe the day or the day
after the release.
I think it was like November 1st or 2nd or something like that, which is pretty cool. And then of course they did, if you're in the UK, they did a BBC sort of like small concert, kind of like the equivalent of a Google small desk or tiny desk concert, just for a small audience at one of the local smaller theaters where they did some classics, redid a couple of their hits, plus some of the singles from this album. I was impressed with it too. I'm not the biggest Cure fan in the world, but I know what I like, and I like this. I thought like every song, every track on it felt like a Cure song.
Right.
It wasn't just them trying to be something else or trying, I don't mind if a band experiments. I think it's very important, like for an artist to like experiment musically. But this was an album from a band that knew who they were.
Yeah, if you want to experiment,
what they wanted to put out.
I'm with you, right? Experiment all you want, but if you're going to experiment, then put out a steady flow of music and then experiment that way. Don't be the Cure and then take 18 years off and then experiment with an album. And they didn't do that. They did, and that's not to say they didn't push things and they didn't sound, they didn't try new things. They did. There's a lot of stuff in here that I think they've never done before, but it's still, like you said, it sounds like the Cure. So
yeah.
Well, all right.
We have.
I was going to say,
lost our Bill.
Unfortunately, Bill, Nostradamus that he predicted the future and his own demise, at least on this podcast. And so he is not with us currently. He is trying to find his charger, and Lord knows what else that man is getting up to. But that is our show. That's the way we wrap things up. And now that we have closed the door on that, we've given you our Wolves of the Week, it is time for us to retire. But in the meantime, we want to thank all of you who have listened to this show, who have joined us on the live stream. Please, by all means, tell your friends about us. Ask them to come on and watch it. Go check out our YouTube channel, like and subscribe, hit the little bell up top, rate and review us anywhere you get your podcasts. As always, if you want to find us on social media, please do so. On Facebook, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast, and we're at Comic Book Bears everywhere else at the finer social media sites, including Blue Sky, where we all have taken a more active role, especially as it has blown up this week. We want to, for some reason. Yeah, I know. Just who knows? As there was a mass exodus. But we especially want to say thank you to our good friend James Figueredo, who hung out with us through the bulk of this live streaming podcast and offered some great stuff over here in our chat. So thank you. Oh, yeah. And with all of that, you're going to hear a explosion and a woof, and with that we bid you good night.
Woof. Boom.
Bang.
Good night.